What's happening, everybody, and welcome to the Zebco Revolution. Or we technically could say the Zebco Evolution. And we're going to say that it's the evolution of the micro trigger spin reel. Now, I bought a micro trigger spin reel not too long back when I bought the Mitchell 304, and a couple of y'all have asked me what happened to the Zebco that you bought, because that was the first reel we bought that morning. We did a little stop, drop, and roll, hit the antique store, and it was the same day that we bought the 304. Well, a lot of times if you see I buy something but it doesn't immediately show up on video, it's because I have a plan. I do have plans. I've been known to plan things. I'm not always flying by the seat of my pants and Mr. Sporadic, but it happens. And what happened was, I was hoping that this spring and summer, as the temperature changed, we were going to go do some micro fishing and really use some smaller baits and catch just panfish, you know, that type of thing. You may hear my cat in the background because he really, really wants to get in this room. But there's hooks in here everywhere, and everything in here looks like a toy, so he can't come in here. So I'm not being mean. Anyway, it was a Zebco Legacy trigger spin, underspin with the trigger. And yes, I do still have it. Right here. Okay, and I've cleaned it up. And it actually broke. The foot broke on the back of it. We got some Gorilla Glue on there holding it, and it seems to be pretty tough. So I'm hoping that when I mount this thing on a rod, it doesn't just bend in two. But anyway, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a really fast evolution of this trigger spin reel and how it all seems to change through the years. We're going to start off with the very first one, which is what the very first one I ever bought was called the Omega. The Omega 44, okay? Really not a lot of difference in the next three. My cousin and I used to call these things trash cans. Yes, we did. It's just what we call them, and we called them that because they look like trash cans. They had little flat bottoms on them with a big hole at the top, like you'd put trash in it, then you'd take the lid off, take the bag out, and replace it. A trash can. So we call them trash cans. So anyway, the Omega, this is either a 144 or the I-44. I've never really been able to figure out because the little thing they put on here saying what it is, 44. I never have understood. If it's an I, what does it stand for? If it's a 1, what does it stand for? I don't know. Why is it the Omega 144? Who knows? Anyway, what you got here, a drag. Always got your little drag button. You can take it apart from the bottom and the top to get to it internally. And what the biggest difference you're going to find with these is going to be up top here. You have a single pin for your retrieve on the bell and a rubber, it's more of a rubber O-ring style top for the top of this thing. Now this is what I had to replace on this reel when I bought it because it had deteriorated and broke all the pieces. So they still make these new. This is a brand new part for this reel, okay? That rubber part is what stops the line and pushes it up against the top of the housing for the, it pins it in between it basically. When you raise it up, it pins the line between that rubber and the top of the bell. All right. And you have, again, the single pin, but you have your little anti-reverse switch on the side right here. Allows you to, you know, lock it in. And you have a trigger that was a little bit larger. I kind of like it better, to be honest with you, than the ones we're going to see next. But that's pretty much it. And a T-handled crank, okay? Let's put that back together and move on to the next. The next is going to be the Legacy, the one that we actually picked up at the flea market. It is basically built identical. The only thing that they decided, hey, let's change. Yeah, that's right. You don't have that T-handle anymore. You still have your drag right there on the side. It still looks like a trash can. The hole on top is still the same size. And you still have that basically flat beaver tail style crank right there. Or I'm not crank, but the release lever button. Because it's not really a button. It's a lever. It's more of a lever. But you still, I forgot to mention, you take these screws out. And you could change the crank from one side to the other depending on which direction you wanted to retrieve, right or left hand. Now if you notice, the screw is recessed. It's actually inside that little piece right there. They did that on both of these guys. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you something. If you ever use these, make sure that screw stays tight. Okay? On numerous occasions, I have lost that screw. Didn't realize it, somehow it came undone and it fell out, and I walked 11.5 miles and God only knows where the screw went, because the only way that I found out was the crank came off in my hand. Now you are basically stuck out there fishing with a reel that the crank will come out of. Okay? You can still do it, but it's a pain because it keeps coming out. So always check that screw and make sure that it stays tight. Otherwise, you'll be playing that game the whole way. Okay? So anyway, the Legacy basically still the same reel. Still the same identical thing. There's your only change right there. You still have a single pin. That's it. That was your change. All right? Now we're going to move on to the next one. Now this is the reel that I actually spent the most time with in the 80s, which is the Classic. All right? The Classic was basically the same reel. You still got your single thumb here. This is actually one of my reels from the 80s. This is my original reel from the 80s. And they decided they were going to call it Feather Touch. If you ever look on the lever back there, it says Feather Touch. So you still had the large hole at the top. You still had your anti-reverse on the side. Everything was pretty much still the same. You just popped it loose. Except on the back here, it said UL Classic. Ultralight Classic. That was pretty much it. That was the only change. I had hundreds of these things. The place I used to buy them, the gentleman behind the counter said, "Are you going to allow anybody else to buy any of these?" I just kind of laughed. And I said, well, probably not. Because I really like them. They really worked well. Of course, though, you still had single pin. Now, all three of these reels that I'm showing you right now, all are stamped on the bottom, made in the USA. Okay? They were all made in the US. Now, when you move up, the next change was pretty drastic. It was a body change, a few name changes, a couple of different style reels made. You went to this guy here, which they called the 11. And I believe it was called the 11T at one point, which was 11 trigger. Okay? Now this is actually a Bill Dance crappie edition. I don't know why. I don't know why it all of a sudden became a crappie reel. But it changed and it went to this more little hourglass kind of shape. You still could take it loose at the bottom and take it loose at the top and to get to your pieces, but you had a change came into play. 2 retrieval pins. Okay? 2 retrieval pins there. And if I'm not mistaken, this ended up being a ball bearing setup, and I think it used to say it on the side there, but it doesn't say it anymore. Really the same identical reel, other than the 2 retrieval pins on each side of the bell up there. Your drag was still in the same place, but your finger control had changed slightly. It was more really just for that one finger, and that was pretty much it. The other big change was made in China. That was the only other big change. Now they still worked pretty good, and with this particular model you could take the screw off and you could still change sides with that, but for carrying purposes you could loosen this screw and you could fold the crank arm in. I don't know what good that did really, but I mean, if you wanted to carry it however, you could tuck the arm in if you felt the need. They're already so small. Again, make sure that screw's tight. Keep an eye on it. Also, it had made ridges on the screws so you could loosen it with your fingers instead of having to use a flathead where all the others were flatheads. Okay, let's put this guy back together. And I'm going to show you something kind of neat. They made this reel in a couple versions. Now, one of the other versions that I have is on a rod at the moment. Let me get that. The Platinum version. The Platinum version was basically the same identical reel that you had right there, but they called it the 11 Platinum version. It was all metal. Okay, it was an all metal reel. There was no plastic involved. Okay, that's pretty much it. Drag was still in the same place. You still had the screw. Of course, the thumb crank piece had gotten a little smaller. Worked really well. I've got another one of these somewhere that I really need to find because it's frightening me that I don't know where it is. I'm scared, shaking right now because I really like this reel that much. They work really well. Great little reels. But again, nothing really had changed other than they called it the platinum version. Okay, now we're going to move up to basically the present. Sort of the present, okay? You moved into this guy right here. You still had your single, kind of a one finger, but they kind of changed the dynamics of it slightly, the engineering. Now, here's a big change inside. You went from that O-ring style, that what held the string up on top of the cap, to more of a pyramid kind of thing going on there on the belt. You still had your two pins there for your retrieval. Drag still in the same spot, screw still the same kind of thing there. But now in order to get inside of it, on the bottom, to get the mechanics of the thing, you have a screw on the front of the body and the little cap comes off and then you can kind of get to it that way. All in all, the only thing that changed was that right there, your bottom piece to get in. And now they call it the Micro 33. It has a new name. That's right, it got renamed. Now we're going to jump up into modern times, where the only real thing that got changed was the cap. Now, one thing I want to point out in the modernizing of these reels, you see how big the holes were on the ones from the 80s and back. The hole began to get smaller. Okay? And the reason for that is, this is the smallest one. This is the Zebco Micro 33. It's probably the most modern. The hole got really small. Now you still have the dual pin inside, but that hole got smaller because the smaller that hole gets, the more that line will stay closer to the bell and closer to those retrieval pins. Because a lot of times with these reels, the problem that you had was you had to keep tension on the line, keep the line taut, so the pin would be able to grab the line inside. And their way of kind of counteracting that is to put in two pins and to make the hole smaller so the line stays closer inward toward the pins, so you don't have to really do that. Now, to be honest with you, I've never really had that problem with the older ones. It might have done it a couple of times. I think Daiwa was always my worst. Daiwa always had, and that was more with the spin cast reels, you had to, when you cast, you had to pull back and get that tension on the line to get the line to catch the retrieval pins. So anyway, there you go. There's kind of the evolution of these tiny trigger reels from Zebco, from my beginnings to most modern right now, and their little changes. Now what we're going to do is something special. We're leaving today, and we're heading out to a couple of antique stores and maybe flea markets and try to find something. Because I've been having that itch. I want to make something work. I want to take it from dead back to alive. I want to be Dr. Frankenstein. And that's what we're going to do. So, prepare yourselves. We're going out and get in the truck and head out of here. See you in just a minute. Okay, so we have a win. We actually found something. A couple of things, actually. Now, one is fairly typical and one is not. So I'm going to take you to the back of the pickup here, and I'm going to show you where I bought this stuff and show you what they look like and what they are. Because they're actually, one of them is kind of cool. I've never heard of it before, and we're going to look it up and see what it is. And then we're going to take it home, take it apart, and make it work really good. So what we have here is a little Mitchell 308. It seems to be working just fine. I'm going to take it home and still take it apart, clean it up, but we're going to go fishing with that little guy sometime soon in the near future. Looks like it's in good shape, and it's on a Shakespeare rod made in the old USA. Appears to be solid fiberglass. I'm assuming that it is because it whips like a good old CB antenna. Now this guy, man, is this thing peculiar, but it does seem to work okay. It is a Luxor, made in France. I do not know who this is, but it seemed to work, and I wanted to give it a try. It's a very cool looking reel. You have an anti-reverse switch. I mean, I don't know anything about it, so what we're doing right now is learning. Very cool looking though. And it is on a what appears to be a Garcia. I'm assuming that's either a G or backwards A. What do y'all think? I don't know. We're going to take a look at all of it when we get to the house. So anyway, it came from this place here. And it came from him. You don't mind being on YouTube, do you? Okay, good. That's Chris. Chris, me and him just met. Actually, I was here once before and got something from him. And we're going to take a quick zip around the store, which will be some music probably involved and not me talking, which I'm sure y'all will be happy about. And we'll go from there. So I am just now leaving the, make sure I'm not backing into anybody, the Lightfoot Antique Mall, where I had an incredible conversation with the owner, Chris. We are in Williamsburg. We are basically in Lightfoot, Williamsburg. If you ever get the chance, go in there and see Chris at the Lightfoot Antique Mall. It's funny because that place used to be the With candy store when I was a kid, and my mother would always take me in there and let me buy some kind of candy or something like that, providing I behaved myself. And yes, whether you believe it or not, I got to go in there a lot. When there's candy involved, a child's going to behave himself. So anyway, I talked with Chris for quite some time. He's got my name and my number, and he's going to let me know if any other fishing equipment comes in. And I told him that his store, of course, would be on YouTube. So if you get the chance, yeah, go visit Chris at the Lightfoot Antique Mall right here in good old Williamsburg, Virginia. You'll like it. It's a neat place. Very neat place. Very cool to walk through there after all those years as a kid, going through there and picking out all kinds of candy to take home and eat, providing any of it got home. I don't know if I ever let any candy get all the way back to the house. I probably finished off most of it right there while we were in the car. So anyway, let's go home and take a look at these reels and see exactly what they are. We know what one of them